so thankful, so humbled to be all of your pastor. We rely on biblical stories to authenticate our living, to guide us and to remind us what all those saints before us have learned. Genesis, the first book of the Bible, tells us where we came from. And tucked within the two different but complementary creation stories, did you know there were two different creation stories? You don't have to go home and read the whole book of Genesis, but just read the first two chapters and you'll get it. But in those two stories found in the first two chapters of Genesis, we come to understand that God created us with passion and spirit and love. That God was very intentional about gifting us uniquely. And that God declared all of us good. Where did we come from? God. And then, as if to send us out from our scripture stories with a complete picture of how our lives should be lived, Revelation is at the end of the Bible. Oh, some folks have preached some scripture on Revelation, have they not? But it appears to me that Revelation tells us where we're going. Not a damnation of a fiery hell with a God of judgment and punitive that keeps score. But questions about what our future holds. They're questions that haunt us sometimes, aren't they? I am reminded daily in role of pastor of the tension between our celebrations of life and the fragility and difficulty of life. Those in our church family who face difficult roads to recovery from cancer or other physical ailments. Those in our church family and others who continue to struggle with addiction. Those in our church family and others who are harshly labeled for their sexuality or gender identification. Those in our church family and others who are ignored, who are pushed to the margins because of mental illness or differing physical abilities. Those in our church family or others who seek employment or relief from very tough economic conditions. These are real issues affecting real people. And frankly, it's my belief, contrary to lots of popular preacher opinion, that these real issues make no difference in ravaging the bodies and the spirits of all people equally. People of faith and people of no faith at all. I think if I read one more post or hear one more commentator explain to us that the natural disasters or that a person's struggle with cancer is God's test or God's judgment, I will lose it. And in justifying their position, I've heard many of them stand on the crutches of the book of Revelation. Oh my, how I wish they could join us here this morning. The politicians, the commentators who claim God's wrath on certain parts of the world and certain people who don't believe as they do. I wish they were all here. And I give thanks that we're here. That we're here gathered to hear these words in Revelation. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw a holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, I love this one. "See, I'm making all things new. And he said, write this, for these words are trustworthy and true. And then he said to me, it is done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I saw a new heaven and a new earth. That was John's vision of something new, something different. Not a catchphrase to get votes, but a place where justice and love and peace would prevail, where oppression and hatred and divisiveness would end. I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Brothers and sisters, can we catch that vision today? The first heaven and first earth was passed away. Listen, in our lives, we're going to experience some times of heaven. Glimpses where things are going so well that we can just burst with gratefulness and gratitude. Many of the saints in our life that we remembered this morning, can you recall some of your great memories with them? Simple times with our loved ones that felt like just a slice of heaven on earth. Whether those glimpses are in the arms of a lover, or the hands held around table of fellowship or bedsides, or meals shared at tailgates, or packed in backpacks, or sounds of babies babbling, or children laughing. Listen, let's embrace the first heaven however and whenever we can find it. And then, my friends, sometimes we will experience earth and all that comes with that. Disappointment and heartache, tragedy and tough times, divisions, estrangements from family and friends, and any number of challenges. But just as we're called to embrace any glimpse of heaven we can find, we're reminded that earthly challenges will also pass. The home of God is among mortals. God will dwell with them. They will be God's people, and God will be with them. Mortals? Well, that's us. That's you and me and them. That's where the home of God lives. We are where God dwells, if we'll let God do it. And as comforting as that is, we're reminded that God also dwells with those with whom we disagree. As much as we'd like to make our case, and this week I'm sure they're going to be making it in a big way, but God dwells in the hearts of Republicans and Democrats, of rich and poor, of Jews and Protestants, and Mormons and Catholics and Muslims. God dwells with all those who seek communion with God and with one another. No matter who we are or where we are on our journey, God comes to us, often in the presence of one another, and wipes a tear, comforts our pain, brings us food and shelter, and extends a compassionate and loving hand. I am making all things new. I love it. For when God dwells in us, we actively participate in making all things new. Today we've honored and thought about the saints who came before us, whose examples we wish to follow. And we've honored the saints who are alive today and inspire us. Church, we should remember too that we belong to the communion of saints. And it's in this community we partake of the divine. Newness to live, my friends, is a summons to solidarity with those who've given their lives for witness to God, for all the saints then and now. So I offer in humbleness my own translation of Revelation 21, 1 through 6. Then in the midst of political bantering, overwhelming needs, grief over loss of loved ones, and daily struggles, I can envision a new way to live. For the way of division and oppression is not bringing God's vision to God's world. I see a holy community anchored by the saints who have lived and died before us. I see a community which seeks to live out God's radical inclusion and hospitality and love. And when it seems this community is unachievable, I hear a voice, sometimes loud, sometimes so faint, amidst the worries of the world, that I have to lean in ever so close to hear. But I do hear that voice. It's God's voice. I am with you. I dwell within you and among you. Look for me in the faces of those around you. Look for me in the faces of those around you. Look for me in the faces of those in the world who seek to do justice and who need justice, who love mercifully and who seek love, who walk humbly in the journey with me. Trust me, trust my presence with you on the journey. I'm it. I am your beginning. I will be your end. And I'm all that comes in between. I will make all things new. So embrace my presence. And I beg you, allow me to be in you, to work through you. Walk with a newness to live, faithfully, intentionally, and with all the hope and promise that I give.
For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.